Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Sam Callahan back with the Callahan Training Group podcast. We're going to call this Season 2, Episode 3. I want to talk a little bit about hit factor training, hit factor math, and then work that into stage planning. So the first half kind of applies to anybody who shoots for training in general. I like hit factor training. Second half will be a lot more for like USPSA stage planning kind of people, but it's both pretty good to know as a shooter and being able to plan and justify things I'll do. So first thing I will say is math is kind of like the least fun part about this sport, but it helps me justify decisions and it helps me justify stage planning, training, taking positions, eliminating positions, things like that, from a pretty objective stance, using math to say this makes sense mathematically. I will do this because it mathematically makes sense. It puts me in a positive mindset. It not I will do this because it mathematically makes sense. First of all, gets more out of your training, but second of all, you don't plan with emotions or I thinks anymore. You just kind of do the math, weigh the options. And now it's kind of like I call it hit factor accounting for lack of better terms, because now it's like cost versus opportunity cost. What is this going to cost me versus what is this going to cost me? So first thing I like to talk about in hit factor training, for those of you who are unfamiliar or need it simplified, hit factor training is simply points per second. Simplest way to put it. Any drill you do, you have a certain amount of points you can earn, divided by the time it took me to do it, equals my score. I like this better for police. I like this better for anybody, not even just competitive shooters, because there's no argument. If you can do the same job I can do in less time, you win. So if you guys both are running, say, a shoot house, you guys are both running some kind of SWAT drill or something like that, but one of you can complete it the same clean, but he can do it quicker, I'd ask him how he did it. That's how I would start to get better. I would start to learn how I can do the same drill, the same effort, the same thing with less input or with less time. So hit factor training is big in my mind. It's the only way to train. There's no other way to argue. I don't talk anything unless you want to like race hit factors anymore. I will learn from you if you could beat my hit factor. You'll learn from me if I could beat your hit factor. It's oversimplified, but we'll leave it at that. Really for me then, that means a lot of my training, a lot of my shooting, a lot of my stage planning for later, especially involves just what I describe as flow, but flow is just keeping the gun running. Because if this is points per second, if I can keep scoring points while the time is running, that's going to be the most efficient thing I can do. So I like kind of planning things around eliminating dead times, only focusing on the shooting times, being able to justify rushing between targets, not rushing on targets, things like that. So we'll start right there. I think efficiency versus speed is a big thing to talk about in hit factor training, because if you go back and watch my previous video, what you're trying to do is think about in training, I'm trying to understand how fast I am in like splits and transitions and stuff, and just eliminate the dead times between. If I can eliminate dead times and just keep the shooting part, the important part, then I win in general, right? So really the easiest way to start to talk about this kind of stuff, because you could do a bunch of if, ands, and buts, but like is USPSA scoring goes, Alpha's worth 5 points, Charlie's worth 3 points, Delta's worth 1 point. As far as minor scoring goes, I'm not going to talk major because it's too confusing for the general public for right now. But really then I like to talk about stationary shooting first, because we could talk about this in a lot of different aspects, but let's just talk about stationary shooting, shooting classifiers, shooting standards, just standing and shooting anything. I like to think that a Charlie is generally pretty costly when you're standing still. Delta's obviously worse. How much? Well, that starts to help me make decisions. I think a Charlie is worth about zero point 0.3 to zero point 0.4 seconds of like raw time loss, if you think about it, depending on how fast, slow, good you are. So the better the shooter, it might be a 0.32 loss rather than a 0.4 loss, something like that. But I'll also say from a grandmaster perspective, a Charlie is a lot more costly too. So from an average perspective, let's just say 0.3 to 0.4 seconds loss per Charlie. That means every time you do a fancy 0.18 split, but you crack an alpha Charlie, the next person just needs to shoot two alphas in 0.38 to 0.48 seconds to beat you. Sounds pretty friggin' easy to me. I know any average shooter, even with a little micro pocket gun, can shoot a 35 split two alphas pretty simply inside of 7 yards. So why rip off alphas at rip off Charlies at cool split times? And I'm talking to you guys who like to burn down El Pres or bill drills and stuff like that. If you have a Charlie in a bill drill, it's unexcusable. It's a fail. I don't care how fast you go. Mathematically, it's not worth it. It's worth 0.35 roughly seconds of loss. So how are you going to gain that back in trigger pulls? You mathematically can't do it. Delta is obviously going to be a lot worse. Delta is going to be worth about 0.7 to zero point 0.8 seconds of raw time loss. So you shoot an alpha delta and you shot it in, let's say, a 0.2 second split to be mathematically easy. Well, that means you could add 75 to that. And you could say, well, I just shot a 95 split. And I think it's pretty easy for me to justify shooting two alphas in a 75 split then and getting two alphas rather than trying to rip off an alpha delta at an 18 split or whatever. So you could start to do this math and do a lot of what ifs in this. You could do a lot of what ifs standing still. You could start applying this to every drill, and you'll just start to realize that mathematically, stationary inside of 7 yards, Charlies are unexcusable, unacceptable. They can't be, they're not justifiable mathematically is the way we'll start to look at it. A miss is going to be worth roughly 2 seconds plus, depending on the percentage of points in a stage. Obviously, we're not training to justify misses. I'm not training to miss. I don't care what part of this game demands it, unless it's a disappearing target. I'm not training to skip targets or skip positions and stuff like that. But we could start to justify taking Charlies and Deltas. We could start to justify that if we can eliminate positions, if we can move fast enough and things like that. So I kind of like to start right there. Stationary, Charlies and Deltas are pretty much unacceptable inside of, well, Charlies in general are unacceptable inside of 7 yards if you want to be competitive. If you want to be a high performance shooter, Charlies are unacceptable inside of 7 yards, 8 yards. From 12 to 18 yards is where you could start to justify some pretty fast decision making and fast splits and fast transitions as well, not just fast splits. But if you're shooting pretty efficiently and you have a Charlie in 12, 18 yards and you're keeping the pace up, you call that shot, you adjust and don't keep dropping Charlies. That's where a Charlie is probably okay to leave there rather than take a makeup shot, or slow down in the future. That's where you just have to be visually more aware. And then outside of that, obviously those Charlies and Deltas are going to be costly, but there's too big of an if, there's too big of a what drill are we shooting to start to talk about some of the further distances. So that's all the stationary stuff I like to talk about. Well, then when we're done talking about the stationary shooting, I like to start to talk about moving and shooting and how to start to justify Charlies and Deltas and like when is a Charlie Delta okay? When are mics okay? When is this stuff okay? Now Mike's never okay, misses are never okay, unless it's a disappearing target. Now this becomes interesting because this just happened at Maryland State and we had this argument about it. There was a disappearing target. You could shoot it in such a way that you don't add a position to the stage. You get a free look at a target. You can collect 10 free points. Well, that would be mathematically worth it to me because I'm not adding any stage time. I'm not adding a position. I'm not adding a movement. I'm not doing anything like that. I'm collecting 10 points as long as I just do it mentally, acutely. If I have to jump back into another position and shoot 10 points, then it's probably not worth it because you could start to justify like, well, moving is going to take me about 2 seconds plus the work it takes me to shoot. And those 2 seconds is going to not be worth the miss to go back and forth to another position that I otherwise wouldn't travel to, right? So it becomes interesting to start to look at the how to justify it, when and where. And I'll actually splice in the video I'm talking about right now, the Maryland State match, where you can justify coming back for this swing, this Turner. Now, the reason we justify coming back for it, because it was 2 targets. So that's 20 points. That's 20 points. Now that's 4 mics. So you start to think about, oh, okay, we could start to put a lot more points for this one single position in here. And you could start to really think there's not hard rules. Disappearing targets the only time I'm really going to talk about accepting the disappearing or the mics. Maybe, maybe not. We can start to do math on it. But then otherwise, I'll talk about like eliminating positions becomes a big decision-making skill when it comes to stage planning, which I'm about to roll into. When do I decide to eliminate positions? How do I decide to eliminate positions? Where do I take certain targets from, et cetera, et cetera? This is always a running question. Now, what I found is stopping and starting. Just stopping, getting a sight picture, and then starting again. Not even firing shots, not doing the work of shooting, doing the dead time stuff. Takes about 1 to 2 seconds, right? So adding an extra position to a stage, even if it's a window next to your window, stopping and starting, not travel time to that position. Stopping and starting is going to add an extra 1 to 2 seconds. So if I'm passing that position and there's no extra travel time, you're going to add 1 to 2 extra seconds of your stage to stop in an extra position. Okay. Can we justify that? We'll talk about it. If I'm going out of my way to add a position, now I'm adding the travel time which is not part of my stage, right? I'm going out of my way to add this position or doubling back to a position. I'm adding extra travel time to then add 1.1 to 2 seconds of dead time. You can start to realize running out of your way to add positions is very rarely worth it. Very, very rarely worth it. It seems obvious, duh. This is where I start to talk about, well, then when is it worth it to skip positions, not skip positions? If I am eliminating a position inside of the flow of the stage, meaning I'm going to go to from A, the start, B, to finish, and I'm not going to add a position in here, you could just flow by a position and justify then putting that target in another array over here, right? So let me be more clear about that. Let's say instead of having 3 stops to a stage, stop A, stop B, stop C. At stop B, I'm only going to take 1 target, but it's a really easy position to see that target from, right? Well, instead, I'm just going to stop at A, my start position. I'm going to skip position B. I'm going to go right to C. And then even though that target is harder to see from position C, I just saved myself 2 seconds of shooting time by not stopping at position B. So then I can justify 2 seconds of shooting time downrange and I have no loss. And then you look at, well, even shooting a target carefully isn't going to take me 2 seconds. It's not. Even taking half-second splits at a target, well, that's a half-second extra time plus a transition in. So we're talking like 3/4 of a second of extra time added to a stage to justify eliminating a 1 to 2 second stop up range, right? So you could start to look at mathematically where to make it worth it. Now I'm going to splice in a video right here of the very first stage I shot at, I think it was Carry Optics Nationals. It was one of the nationals, the very first stage, but I'll splice it in here, where there's a decision whether to go right, to go left. Everybody had to start in the same target. It's really close. It's to your right there. You're going to rip the target off, and then you're either going to flow into the right corner of the stage or you're going to flow into the left corner of the stage. Now, I chose to flow into the left corner of the stage because then what I did was go from the left corner of the stage all the way to the right corner of the stage. I did a reload into the right corner of the stage, and I eliminated a stop in the middle. Now, what that did was I eliminated a stop in the middle, meaning I can bank now 2 seconds of shooting time. Now, in the middle, the reason people were stopping in the middle there is because there was a target. It might have been a no shoot even, but it was a target that was pretty hard to see from position A or B, or A or C, we'll call it, not B here. So I chose to take it from C because I could lean really hard around a barrier. So I was like, in my head, I was like, all right, that's maybe a half second of extra transition. And then on the target itself, it's only going to be about a half second of splits because I have to be careful on it. So that's a second of shooting time I'm going to add to the stage. By not stopping and starting, I'm going to save myself about 1.5 seconds on average, plus the shooting time anyway. So I'm like, all right, well, mathematically, I can justify this. And by the way, even though it was the first stage of my nationals, it was one of my better performances of the entire thing because I applied just math to it. I applied the I will mentality. I knew my metrics. I knew how fast I did things. I knew how much time Charlie's deltas and stops and all that stuff cost in my game. I could justify it. I can not just theorize it. I can make it true in my training. So I leaned on my training and leaned on my math, and boom, I had a very solid stage finish. Now
I came over here, I reloaded again, but I still did it.
the funny thing is, my stage plan was different than all the other squad, not wildly different. Like, let's say we all started at the start position. I went to position A to C. Everybody else went from C to A. I just ran it backwards, we'll say, but I justified it in the fact that I identified what I was talking about here. I identified flow, where I could justify standing still, where I could justify moving, where I could justify taking a Charlie or two. I eliminated a position through the center. I could reload it right through it. And as a righty, I like to move from left to right if I'm going to just do a horizontal reload. So did my math, did my logic, basically. I applied my logic and my formula to the stage, and boom, it worked out for me. I finished pretty high percentage, and that was a pretty high percentage of, if it was, I think it was Carry Optics Nationals, and a high percentage of Carry Optics Nationals this year was pretty cool to see, because Eric Raffel came and stomped everybody so intensely that I think he kind of, like, I don't want to say skewed, he earned it, but man, he really threw off the curve of what the 100% winner was. So I think I mean, I came within 80, above 85%. I want to say somewhere in the 90 percentile of him in that. So I could justify my methods, my training, but that leads me right into my stage planning. So I wanted to talk about that whole first part to start to lay down a basis of, like, I have to know that at an A class level and beyond, I just like to say a competitive level and beyond, even if you're not at an A, you could start to justify that's my goal. Charlie's stationary or unacceptable. Delta's obviously unacceptable. Moving, you can start to justify it as I just was discussing. And you need to know all that math so that we can start to talk about my stage planning system. So in my stage planning system, I have kind of a three-step process to it because I like to add list, process, bullet points to everything because human beings are better at just following lists. We're just very good at that kind of stuff. We're good at forming habits, following lists, and just doing things habitually. So the first thing I like to do is talk about like when I walk up to a stage, the first thing I'm going to try to do is, well, you got to listen to the stage brief. You got to identify how many targets are on the stage. You got to hear all that information to then start to what I call roadmap the stage. So I need to walk up to a stage and be like, all right, cool, 12 targets, 2 steel, got it, cool. The faux pas I see most people do, and if you're a grandmaster and you have your ways, have your ways. I'm not saying this is the best way or the only way. I'm just saying this is my way that I teach all my people, and nobody has complained about it. When I walk up, I don't want to get in that Congo line with everybody else. What does everybody do? They hear the stage brief, they wait for the bravest soul or the GM to start walking the stage, and everybody just follows him to see what he's seeing. That's great if you've never shot before, if you don't know what you're doing and all that stuff. Watch Grandmaster, ask questions, listen to what he's doing. But I like to formulate a better stage plan for myself just based off logic. So instead of walking in the Congo line, instead of getting in, I hear 12 targets, 2 steel, awesome. And I just walk the outside of it. And this is something that Kita actually taught me. Walk the outside of it, count your targets. So your stage plan isn't a really good stage plan that involves 11 targets, it involves 12. It's going to show you a lot too. On your way around this, it shows you more of the stage than you would if you just stayed in the boundaries, right? Kita talks about being able to eliminate like the walls, eliminate the boundaries, and think without them, right? I find it hard mentally. So if you walk around, you go to every target. First of all, I can count every target. I know that sounds funny, but if you've ever had an FTSA, maybe it's not so funny. Maybe you want to walk around the outside of the stage and first be like, here's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, I'm not counting them in any order that is putting any weight in them. I'm just counting, hey, I need to find 12 pieces of paper and 2 pieces of steel. I don't care. This is not the order I intend to shoot them in. Now, while I'm at each one of these, I also do something. I stand behind the target, look over its head, look over the A box of the head, or look over the top of the the top of the IPSC, right? The little tiny piece of it. And it's going to show you where it's available from. If you look from behind it and look forward, it's going to show you the chunk of stage it's available from. Generally speaking, it's obvious, but sometimes it's not. You'll see this little chunk of stage available over here. And hey, what do you know? I can see the fault lines on the left side over there too. And nobody's going over there. Nobody identified that spot. I didn't identify that spot. I didn't realize that I could even shoot the target from over there. So when you walk around like this, I call it road mapping because what you're doing is you're not putting any weight to this. You're just drawing a road map of the town. I just want to know where all the buildings are, where all the streets are, where all the avenues are, where the detours are. I just want to know where everything is. I want to familiarize it because I want a subconscious stage plan. So I want the stage to be subconscious in my brain. I don't want to have just like I call it, I don't want to have to follow like a GPS, right? I want to have a idea of how to have a roadmap in my mind and be able to pick a route on this map, right? So that leads me into step 2. Once I have the stage road mapped, I know where all the targets are, number 1. Now I know where each position they're available from. Now I can step back to the start position and identify, hey, from the start position, those 3 positions or however many positions identified that I'm going to need to visit, well, that's the closest one. That is the next one, and then that's the furthest one. And you just, without any emotion, without any I thinks, you just mathematically found the best way. You identified all the spots they're available from. You're going to choose the spots that you could group the targets together the easiest, and then you're going to choose the order in those spots that you can visit in the most straight line, right? It becomes very formulaic, right? So now you have a roadmap, boom, you walked around the outside, you know where everything is, you identified all the spots and the pieces, you know where all the targets are. Then you went back in and you selected a route, right? And you're like, well, here's the start position. I'm going to go make a right to target to position A. I'm going to make a left to position B, and then I'm going to go downrange to position C. All right, cool. That's what I call route selection now. You've selected the route in which you would like to travel through the stage. But in my mind, that's very conscious. You have to be like, okay, I'm going to go that way, and then I'm going to shoot these. I don't want to make it so conscious. I want to make it a little bit more subconscious. So step 3 is where the stage plan really is the most important. Now, I say most important, but if you skip step 1 and 2, you can't get to 3. But step 3 is what's going to help you perform the best. I know that it's a little, we're splitting hairs here, but you need step 1. You need to know where all the targets are and all the positions are. Because if you're ignorant to a target or a position, you're just not operating with all the information. Now, stage 2 is just being able to say, I'm going to select a route that involves the least amount of work, the least amount of travel, the least amount of everything, right? Boom, cool. Step 3 is now making it subconscious. Now, this is what I call it landmarking. So we road mapped, we selected a route, but now I want to landmark this route. And now the analogy I start to draw with this is, hey, the first time you've ever driven to work, what did you do? You looked at a map beforehand and you like, oh, that's where it is. It's in that industrial park. Familiarize yourself with the area, right? Road mapping. Next thing you do is you hit start on Google and it tells you the route. You just selected a route. You went through and you said, I think that's the best route. Okay, cool. Now, after you've driven that to work 3 or 4 times and after you've done a couple of reps of it, now you don't normally dry fire your way to work, but we could dry fire the stage, right? So after you've done a couple reps of it, it becomes a version of subconscious. I say landmarking because when you're driving to work, you generally go off landmarks. I make a left at the red building and make a right at this street. Do you even know what street it is anymore? I don't know. I don't even know. I don't know where I am. I don't know even I'm not following routes like make a left on Route 94 and a right on Miller Street. I'm just making a left and a right where I have for the last 20 times. And it becomes very subconscious. Why? Because the stage plan needs to become subconscious. You're learning how to roadmap a stage, select a route, but then make the route subconscious in your brain so that you could focus on the most important thing, speed of sight. What am I going to do? I'm going to shoot my gun as fast as I can call shots on this stage plan. What's the stage plan? It's subconscious. How is it subconscious? Because once I've road mapped and selected a route, I'm going to go through this 1,000 friggin' times and I'm going to add what I call landmarks. Landmarks are spots that I run to on the ground and then spots that I execute. Now, execute to me is just very simplistic approach to saying a target has a spot on it. The spot has a certain amount of sight picture and trigger control required, and I will execute whatever that spot tells me to do, right? It's a subconscious version of shooting. If you go back to my last video, you'll start to identify those attributes in your shooting and you start to identify the how should I treat each target, what are my metrics and my standards. So go back a video that needs to be defined. But now you could start to say, well, all right, my stage planning is going to say I'm going to go to that spot on the ground, so I'm going to run as hard as I can to that spot on the ground, but that spot on the ground happens to be 3 steps out from where I'd like to be ready to shoot. So I know I run as hard as I can to that step on the ground, and that spot on the ground means get the gun ready. When the gun is ready, I have the array landmarked in front of me. It's going to be target A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, however your brain likes to make sense of it. I'm a math guy, so I like to come in and think, all right, that spot means I'm going to settle down into my position and then I'm going to shoot 6 alphas before I leave. I have those arrays subconsciously pictured in my brain so I can kind of go through this whole stage plan with my eyes closed, right? All right, so I know once I'm finished with landmark, run to that spot, shoot that target, that target, that target. What do I do after the 6th shot? I just look at the next landmark I need to run to. And I just sprint to that landmark. When I'm at that landmark brings me to the next landmark, which is another target. Well, if I need to do a reload, my landmark is my magwell. I always tell people I visually index the inside. I, as a righty, will index basically the pinky high side of my magwell. That's my visual index. Well, so I'm thinking spot on the ground, spot on the target, spot on the target, spot on the target, spot on my pinky, spot on the ground, spot on the target, spot on the target, spot on the target. There's no extra thought in there. It just becomes a very subconscious stage plan. I want to walk through, I want to pick all these landmarks, and then my goal after I've made a roadmap, I've selected my route, I've landmarked all of it. I'm going to run through it visually 1 or 2 times physically. And then my goal is to be able to close my eyes and see that a lot of times. Steve Anderson's numbers, double digits. You want to see at least 10 plus runs with your eyes closed smoothly, right? I love Steve Anderson's idea with that because that means the stage plan is becoming subconscious. You can close your eyes and see it, just like you can close your eyes and tell me how you're going to work. That's pretty cool because it becomes like a way to neurally program your brain. If you ever watched an F1 driver describe how he's going to race a track, he can close his eyes and say, okay, this turn 1, I'm going to do this. This turn 2, I'm going to do this. I'm going to shift. He can tell you what he's going to do before he does it because he's done it several times physically. And then he closed his eyes and did it mentally enough times that he programmed what he's going to do. So not only is the stage plan subconscious, but there's a positive imprint in there. You've seen it happen already several times. You know where to go, what to do. There's no extra thought in there. There's no non-productive thought. You run there hard, you aim and shoot at the speed of sight. You run there hard, you aim and shoot at the speed of sight. You reload hard, you run there hard, you aim and shoot at the speed of sight. And if you just get enough reps of that before the stage, you just have to hit play like a movie in your brain. So it becomes interesting because the whole stage planning here, you start to it's not like a trick or a cool thing to be able to make a stage plan in 1 minute. The cool thing is being able to then subconsciously program for 4 minutes, right? You have 5 minutes to walk a stage. I don't want to spend 4.5 minutes deciding what I'm going to do. How many times have you been caught between two stage plans and it wasted a bunch of your time? Well, now not mathematically, you can't do it anymore. You're going to mathematically be able to see what's the best way. You're going to make logical sense of it. Or you could basically say, well, there's two ways. I execute it this way the best because I know I'm going to be confident doing it that way. I'm going to execute. And good. Now, instead of taking 4.5 minutes to make a stage plan and only having a minute to try to visualize it before we start taping, resetting, or shooting, God forbid, if you're first up, now I can visualize my stage plan for 3+ minutes. I can walk through, I can make changes if God forbid need be. And then while I'm doing the subconscious execution with my eyes closed, while I'm programming my stage with my eyes closed, if there's a spot with my eyes closed that I'm a little wishy-washy about, I'll open my eyes, I'll walk to that part of my stage plan, I'll clear it up consciously, and then I'll close my eyes and go back and subconsciously program it and subconsciously program it until I can run through the stage plan with my eyes closed, in Steve Anderson's words, 10 plus times, smoothly, 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 with no conscious control of anything other than my sights. Where am I going? Now, that's why I like the whole spot thing. Spots on targets dictate how fast you shoot. When I look at a spot on the ground or a spot on my mag well, that's just go. Just go. That is proper speed. Why? Because it's the non-shooting activity, so you're allowed to rush it. What's the shooting activity? Calling shots. So I shoot at the speed of sight. I look at what I'd like to do. It tells me what I like to do. So it kind of justifies using your eyes very aggressively and justifies having mental stage plans because I don't want to think or physically feel or have to do any math or balancing, or I don't want to think any unproductive thoughts during the stage. I just want to think, go there, do this, go there, do this, go there, do this. Why? Because I have a formula that will give me a very efficient answer, and I have a subconscious idea of my plan, period, or stop. So then you could start to use this to justify how I'm going to stage plan, how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to do that. When I went to Maryland State, there's a couple of times where I ran a stage differently than the other guys, and they weren't challenging me or anything. They're like, why are you going that way rather than this way? This is what I trained to do. I know my general attributes. I know my metrics, and if I go right, if I go left, I know how my reload works. I know my moving and shooting, what I can move and shoot on, what I can move in and out at. So I'm going to go right, even though everyone's going left, because I roadmap this stage. I developed a stage flow through it, and I realized, okay, that's the best path through. And then I had a subconscious plan of that path, and I had landmarks on that path. And it didn't matter because at the end of the day, at a grandmaster level, if you're wasting no time, we're not doing extra travel and you're not shooting extra targets or doing extra transitions. There's 12 targets. There's 12 paper and 2 steel. We're all going to have to take all those shots. So if you don't waste any time, really it comes down to who collected more alphas and who called better shots, who wasted less time, who made less mistakes. It's not who tried harder, who went faster. You are a grandmaster. You are an A-class shooter. You are a whatever class shooter you are because you are that good. You don't have to try. So now it's going to be who makes less mistakes at that level. And at a grandmaster level, your goal becomes, well, I know I'm good enough. My math, my training, all my subconscious, all my shooting supports that. So now my goal for squeezing my best performances out of my matches, out of my stages, out of anything is now with this formula. I walk up, I roadmap the stage. Okay, that's where everything is. That's where everything's available from. This is easily the best way to do it. All right, now I'm going to be able to close my eyes and do it with like a landmark. All right, there we go. Let it happen, baby. And then once it's over, start it over again. I like you're allowed, I think it was Jerry Mikulak who said it. You're allowed 15 minutes to either gloat or complain after a stage is over. So once it's over, okay. Go over what went mentally good, what you would have done better if it didn't go good, and then you get to move on from there. And the next stage starts over. You have a formula, you have a way to approach it. And then with this formula, it doesn't really talk about what if things go wrong. So I like to address that in this podcast because what if things go wrong? Was it the stage plan that was bad, or did you not have the skill set to keep up with the most efficient stage plan? So in this stage planning, it's fun because it's a fun way to train. I'll lay a stage, I'll put a classifier, I'll put a course of fire, whatever, it doesn't matter. I will run it through this formula, I'll shoot it. And if I can't keep up with part of this formula, it identifies to me what part of my game is lacking. If I'm having a hard time with the moving spot to spot, if I'm having a hard time with it doesn't matter. You can use this formula to say this is the best way to shoot this drill, the best way to shoot this stage, the best way to shoot this array. If I can't do it, why not? And let me go back to my skill training, my performance training, and then bring it back in and hope my stages show me what to do. So this is where local matches are a godsend for everybody, because as much as my skill versus performance track training is great, that doesn't involve performance on demand in front of groups of people at a match all day, every day. So now I like the skill versus performance training I was talking about in the previous video, but now matches let you show your weak spots, right? You have now a formulaic approach to making Charlies and Deltas worth it or not worth it. Justify the fact that Charlies and Deltas stationary are never worth. I'm not going to rush. I'm just going to shoot well, right? You could start to justify when I can move and when I shouldn't move based on when a Charlie is riskier, right? You could start to justify skipping positions, and none of this stuff is actually consciously thinking about the shooting. It's just consciously what will I do and when. So if you come up with all these great things and you don't have a stage plan that's based on conscious control of speed or accuracy, and it's just based on calling shots and going to these positions and shooting those targets, you get to then take an honest look at yourself after a local match or after a small match. You get to take an honest look at yourself and go, what skills didn't keep up with this formula? I'm going to go back and train those harder than the rest of them. I'm not going to not train the rest of them. I'm just going to reprioritize my training. And why am I reprioritizing my training? Because the match is the test. It's the test you're studying for. If you don't go to the test, you're not actually going to get the results. You're not actually going to know if you've learned, if it's subconscious, if you can actually do it. You can study all day long. I don't care if you can shoot GM level drills and you don't go shoot GM level stages, GM level classifiers, especially at major matches. These locals give you the test before having to go get your ass kicked at majors. You got to go to the locals and say, all right, well, I'm going to run this formula through. Which one of my skills is holding me back? Let me go back to the lab. Let me go fix this skill, and let me come back to another local match and rinse and repeat, and probably do that as many times as I need to before I'm confident going to my major matches, right? So this is my kind of formula now. I started formulas. I started this kind of approach. Like my last video said, I needed a system. I needed a process that I could define. And then if something goes right, I can define, hey, I did it within these standards. Just go ahead and do it again. If things go really well, just go ahead and do it again. How'd you do it? Well, here's how I did it. Now, things don't go well. I've defined how they go well for me typically. That's my system. That's my process. And I can identify, oh, I forgot to do this piece, or I failed at doing this piece. So then the next stage comes up and you could say, I will do this thing. I'm going to add this. The next drill you do, the next stage, it doesn't matter. The next match, it doesn't matter. I will do this thing next time because it's what I forgot to do last time. So I will do it because it will lead to better success. And now you have this process approach. You have this formulaic approach, mathematical, logical approach. That's not feelings based. It's not, I think, I feel, I should, I got to go fast. I have to try. Well, if I nail this, no, you know what your numbers are. Put your numbers into the program, run it through. I will do this because my numbers are this. I will go here because this is what the most efficient way is. And bing, bang, boom, you're done. You're not thinking with you're not arguing with the other guys on the stage about what's best anymore. You're saying what's best for me is this. I can mathematically justify it. Do whatever you want to do. I don't care. So that's the other big thing that happens is when I start stage planning now, I'm not gonna ignore information from other people. I want to see what you're seeing. If you see a position that I didn't identify, if you see something tricky I didn't see, I want to collect all the information. But I'm still running all the information through my formula. And at the end of the day, my formula is best for me. I don't care if you don't agree with it. It's okay. I'm not emotionally attached to it. I've just found it works for me. It also works for everybody I've taught it to. I've never had a person this doesn't work for. It helps maximize your performance in general because it gives you a conscious thing to think about. How to maximize my stage is based on a good subconscious plan, based on I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. It's not based on speed. It's not based on follow the GM because that GM he might have his own formula. He might have his own formula he runs all this through, and he might have his own set of skills that match his formula. And if your skills and your logic don't match his formula, don't run it his way. He might be better at some things you're not. I've seen some guys at local matches be able to miss fast enough to win, but that's only at a local match. So do not be lulled into, well, I got to now go 17 seconds because he went 17 seconds. No, run your thing, do your thing. It's you versus you. You got to go to the matches and see it's can I maximize the performance I did in practice? Are my standards matching? Are they increasing as I go? What is my weak spot? And this starts to show you what is actually weak. It starts to give you from a subconscious perspective of in performance, you perform good at this, and less good at this. And I'm going to now prioritize my training at the less good things, the low-hanging fruit, the opportunities, I like to say. I try to keep it very positive. It sounds corny, but positive is the only way to be. Again, Steve Anderson is a big proponent of that. I know Keita is a big proponent of that too. Like you have to think in the I will, I can. Not because it's corny though. I fought that for a while because that's how psychology works. Your brain can't not, it can't don't. It can only do things. Do positive. I will do this next time. Next time I will. Hard doesn't mean anything. Fast doesn't mean anything. Neither does slow. But I will do this. I will get a better sight picture. I will prep my trigger better, or I will lead my gun with my eyes. I will get my grip sooner rather than faster, right? I will leave this target as soon as I can rather than I'm going to go fast, fast. Yeah, these things are all positive things I can do. So This is my little stage planning hit factor math approach. The whole first half of this video is pretty much applicable to anybody, but I take it into stages because I think everybody should be training stages. You should all be going to a local match. There's no excuse anymore. It's so popular. USPSA is so popular. You could just Google it, and within 45 minutes, an hour of you, there's going to be a match. And like I said, I don't care who's there. I don't care if it's a popular match. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's you versus you. Your whole goal is to be able to say, I think my skills are this good in practice. I need to go maximize my skills in performance. Boom. It's you versus you. You get to say, hey, if I go to a stage and I execute the stage exactly as I planned it and everything goes well, and I can do that 5 out of 5 times at every match, good. That's training. That's fucking wonderful. You can go to an indoor match, outdoor match, 10-person match, it doesn't matter. Outlaw, PCSL, you should be shooting these matches to start to get a report card on what's going on. Now, don't get a false sense of security if you're at a 12-person club and you're winning all the time, or you're always third place. If you're at a 12-guy club in the middle of nowhere and there's not a lot of heat around, don't get a false sense of security either. But it's not you versus anybody else. It should be you versus you. It's you versus the percentage, because that's what we're all going for. You're all trying to increase your percentage. Now, I know it's been a hot topic. Percentage isn't the end all be all. I know there's paper GMs out there, but I want you to be able to have a percentage goal and be able to perform at that percentage goal to a high percentage of time, because this whole sport is based off of percentages. Whoever wins is 100%, and we're all judged on that. Whoever beats the classifier is 100%, and we're all judged on that. So I like this way of training. It's mathematical. It's an easy approach. It's a emotionless approach. So thank you guys for listening to this one. Then thank you guys for sticking with me. I'm a little nerdy when it comes to this kind of stuff. I get called pew pew guru, and like I get weirdly nerdy about all these kinds of things. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns about any of my math, I mean, chime in. I always like to hear it. I always like the challenges, because if I can get better, I will. If not, you'll get better, and the industry gets better as a whole. So this is one of the topics that speak to my heart, because I don't focus on going fast anymore. It's not what I do. I focus on being tricky and doing things better, identifying weaknesses in stages, and identifying where I can take advantage of little spots mathematically, and then beat you with less effort rather than more effort. So again, thank you for sticking with me. Now, not a lot of stuff to dry fire in this one, but the point sticks. Don't forget to dry fire.